the fear as well as the courage, the despair as well as the hope. Now this sounds daunting and difficult, which is why these seats are not filled every week, because most people would not volunteer to live like this. You are people of great courage that you're willing even to think about it today. And some people, I've seen them, they come to visit us, and in the middle of my sermon they get up and walk out. And I say, what a shame. What a shame, because it takes courage to stay in a place where you're not comfortable, doesn't it? It does. Believe me, if you stand here, being uncomfortable is at least 20 straight minutes. Because here is where we have to be real. The difference between a sermon and a presentation, between church and a show, is that this is real life. No matter how glossy it looks and how fancy it is, you're only hearing from me, about me, warts and all. This is a hard life. I've said it before. But I'm here to give you good news and good courage that you're already doing it, not because you're here, although that's part of it, because everyone does it, just some do it more consciously than others, because we're born to seek knowledge, to crave understanding, and to make a difference. We're born wanting that. We do it so much that we even forget we're doing it. This is our destiny. But you know, until a century ago, most people thought that life was just birth, work, and death. We didn't even think children had lives, really. We have to thank that old, forgotten psychologist, Sigmund Freud, and his offspring, both good and bad, people like Jung and Erikson and Piaget, who taught us that we grow all the way through our lives. We face struggles all the way through our lives. And that if we're wise and good and lucky, that we'll learn all the way through our lives. There might even be stages that we can identify. They all tried to identify them. A man named James Fowler even found that our faith grows in complexity and subtlety all the way through our lives. It seems obvious to you and me, but remember, 150 years ago, we thought of children as just tiny adults with empty brains and terrible instincts. And now we know that they are not just empty minds and awful ideas and awful thoughts, but works in progress. Well, when did you think you stopped being a work in progress? Did you ever think, I'm done now? Take me out of the oven. No, you're never done. And that's part of the message of liberal religion. You're never finished. There's always more to learn, more to understand, and more to do. Which is why Matthew and I thought about it and said, maybe we can convey this message from throughout the year by lifting up the spiritual life and teaching of children, young people, adults, middle-aged, elders, and even those at the point of death. That every one of those places in life is a place of learning and teaching. We decided to do that for several reasons. One is that we need you to know, to believe, to understand that spiritual life is not a place, but a path. You don't come here to be religious. If you're not religious all the time, you're not spiritual at all. Second, that spirituality is not something we have, but something we do. And third, to liberate your mind about spirituality itself, that it isn't something you're lacking, you always have it. The question is whether or not you know you have it. And finally, wherever you are now is not the end. There are places to go and miles to go before you sleep. But here's the most important part. You're not just doing it for yourselves as individuals. That's the big liberal religious sin, to think it's all about me or you or you or you. Our personal path to spiritual life has a social purpose. When we live more awake, when we know more completely, when we act more with greater integrity, we have an effect on other people. And the wiser, smarter people have effects on people far beyond those around them. In other words, we start to change the world when we start to change ourselves. Remember what Matthew said, I am the change. Yes, you are the change for yourself, but you're also the seed of change for others. We grow not only for our inner peace and wisdom, but for social peace and wisdom. Not only for our inner integrity, but for social integrity. Not only for our well-being, but for everyone's well-being. When you do your best to be a complete person, it will change not only you, but the world. So what I want to talk about today and emphasize something that's very difficult for liberals to wrap their hands around. It's something called duty, that you have a duty to be a spiritual creature. It is due, it is obliged, it is required. You cannot not do it and get away with someone not waving a prophetic finger at you. In ancient India, they thought of this as the word dharma, which meant your responsibility to yourself and to the community. And in ancient Hinduism, they came up with 4 stages of life that we each had a responsibility to go through, not only for ourselves, but for others. For example, when you're young, you're a student, and you must go to school and learn the ways of society, all the scriptures, learn how to behave. When you get to be 25, you should marry, have children, have a business, take care of society, make all the proper responsibilities socially done. And then at the age of 50, yeah, don't I wish, we would begin to retire from work and start doing more contemplative, spiritual things. And then at the age of 75, they imagined everyone lived to 100, you see. You would spend the last 25 years literally wandering in the forest, making yourself ready to merge back into the Brahman and the Atman of life. Well, we don't do that, of course. But it is great that they understood that at every age we have a role to play, not only for ourselves, but for others, that society needs children to be children. It needs teenagers to be teenagers, although that's arduous for everyone, I understand. It needs young adults to be young adults. It needs young families to be young families. It needs middle-aged people to think, oh my God, I'm getting old. It needs old people to say, yeah, you're telling me. It needs the very, very old to say, it's all going to be okay. We all need to be the age we are, not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us. We have to knit ourselves together as individuals. We also have to knit ourselves together as a community. And I don't mean a church community, I mean a human community. Like I said, this is not an easy task. The good news is you're already doing it. The bad news is we can all do it better. And I want to remind you that there is some danger that lurks even when we take on these great things. When you free your mind, it means you have to question your own ideas, not just the other person's wrong-headed ideas, your own wrong-headed ideas. When you grow your soul, it means you have to be willing to change with what you learn. You cannot know a fact and then not act on it. I'll give you an example. It was a few years ago that I started reading Michael Pollan. Some of you know Michael Pollan. He writes about the food industrial complex in America. It's not a pretty picture. And as I read more and more of his stuff and thought more and more about it, I realized that I had become a member of the food industrial complex myself. I thought that I had to eat a certain way to be healthy and decided that was a choice. And so for the last year, and I think permanently, I've become someone who chooses to eat much lower on the food chain. I don't think I've had beef for more than a year, no pork at all. Not because I don't like them, they're really tasty. But because the cost to society, to the planet, is so high that I really can't in good conscience eat the way I used to eat. Once you learn something, you have to change, or you really didn't learn it, you just know it. That's the distinction. Knowing is, I have a fact I can pull out of the air. Learning is, oh, this makes a difference in my life. That's one example. This past summer, someone rear-ended one of our cars, not badly, nobody got hurt, but it's an old car, so it became totaled, as they say. That's the insurance speak for not wanting to pay more than it's worth, right? And so we said, well, do we need another car? And we decided we didn't.